Pens 2, Predators 0. No, there wasn't an earthquake. I just bumped my laptop. This is Matt Gajtka, and this is Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live, as you see right behind me with the custom backdrop. Thanks again to Mike Osti, Alan Saunders, and the crew over there at Pittsburgh Sports Live for the setup. And thank you for watching as the Penguins keep their beaks in front of the Florida Panthers. The Panthers end up sweeping a two-game trip through Ontario here as they beat the Leafs last night, coming from behind in overtime fashion, in fact, beating Toronto, and then taking care of Montreal. Actually, it wasn't Ontario. I lied. They actually lost to the Senators earlier this week, but they beat Toronto. They beat Montreal. So just for a brief moment before this game ended in Pittsburgh, the Panthers were in the second and final wild card spot in the Eastern Conference, but the Penguins do collect the 2 points as Tristan Jarry outduels Juuse Saros, and raise your hand if you saw that one coming. Jarry makes 28 saves. Juuse Saros, though, he was dynamic. He was as advertised tonight. Spectacular in making 43 saves despite letting 2 behind him. I think we can forgive him for letting in a couple there as the punchless Preds are turned away and the Penguins win for the second straight time on home ice, following up that emotional victory against Washington on Saturday, maybe the most emotional win since the Stanley Cup runs, to be quite honest. And then following that up with a complete dud on the road, as this team has tended to do this year, not able to string results or string performances together. Well, they do get right back on track. Give them credit for that one. Taking care of a Predators team that I said was punchless, and for good reason. They're missing a lot of guys. Missing Duchesne, missing Josi, missing Philip Forsberg, who appears to be out for the year. But the Preds, well, they beat the Bruins 2-1 the other night, and they were following the same formula here this evening at PPG Paints Arena, as it was scoreless midway through before Jason Zucker finished off a brilliant setup by, checking my notes, Brian Dumoulin. He does it again after his pass to Jeff Carter. Helped both of them get out of their slumps last week in Colorado in that big win. Dumoulin does it again, handling a tough pass from Yevgeny Malkin and deking around a Pred before dishing it to Zucker on the back door. That's about the only way they're going to beat Saros tonight, was wide open backdoor play. That's how Jake Guentzel scored late in the third off a hard pass from Ricard Raquel that Guentzel tapped in for his 34th of the year. And that was it. The Predators take a couple of late penalties. The Penguins make them pay for one, and they kill off the rest of the time with the other, essentially. And they get the victory, just their 8th shutout win over their past 3 seasons. I think the last time they shut out an opponent was against the Winnipeg Jets a couple of months ago. There haven't been many this year, and that's Tristan Jarry's 2nd of the season as he returns to the lineup. And, in fact, didn't look to be any worse for the wear. He's had several injuries pile up since that original one at the Winter Classic on New Year's Day. And as we've all chronicled, he's been perhaps the worst goaltender in the league in the month of March, but he ends March on a high note for sure, does he not, with the shutout win. Walt Flanagan is here, first comment in the stream, as he often does contribute here. He says, I know this sounds crazy, but maybe the rest of the team doesn't give a hoot when DeSmith is in net. You would think it'd be the other way, right? Because typically the narrative around hockey teams in general is that you try to play tighter with a backup in net, and maybe that's not the case. In this case, I don't know, but I wouldn't read too much into a defensive performance tonight, although the Preds didn't even get over one expected goal until the breakaway chance for Tomasino in the third. That one goes in, it's a different game, obviously. It ties at 1-1, so the Penguins weren't absolutely airtight defensively, but again, the Preds couldn't generate much. It's a shorthanded Preds team, a team that already has scored the second fewest goals in the NHL. So they're hoping to get to 2, and they're hoping Saros doesn't let the other team get to 2. That's their formula this year, and they've won 21 one-goal games in the process and somehow still lingering in the Western Conference playoff race. They're now, or they remain, I should say, 3 points behind the Winnipeg Jets for the second wild card spot, the 8th and final playoff spot, as it were, in the Western Conference. Walt continues, they look like a team that knows they can't win with DeSmith, so they don't even try. Not that Jarry couldn't have been better at times this year, but they look and feel different with Jarry. I don't know if I disagree with that. I think that's pretty reasonable to say that they have more confidence in Jarry. And DeSmith, I didn't disagree with Mike Sullivan's decision to go with him in Detroit. the other day, although I was wary of the fact that DeSmith played brilliantly in the first two periods against the Capitals Saturday, and then there were so many folks who were excusing him for that third period. I thought all three goals were odious against Washington, even the Ovechkin one that snuck under his arm. That wasn't Ovechkin's best shot by far, and you'd love to see a save in that situation. The other two goals he allowed, he's swimming out of his goal, well out of the crease, can't even get back. Seems to have issue following the play, does DeSmith. And I think in general just has a problem when he gets too much playing time over a short stretch. He's played a lot this year, a career high in games played at the NHL level. I believe we've gotten to for Casey. And I don't care if he has been more consistent this month. You can't play him 3 straight games, in my opinion. Well, I guess you could have. If Tristan Jarry wasn't healthy, it would have been DeSmith. I don't think you would have gone to Dustin Tokarski, although I've been surprised before. But if Jarry is anywhere near available, and again trying to come back from what I believe is his third separate injury this calendar year, then you got to go with Tristan Jarry. And he showed you exactly why. He made a couple of breakaway saves in this game, one on Kiefer Sherwood, one on Tomasino, whose first name eludes me because, well, he's not a very good player. No offense to him. He's in the NHL, and I'm not. But let me just read the forwards for you who dressed for Nashville tonight. Afanaseyev, Asplund, Evangelista, who's been hot lately, Glass, Jankowski, noted former Penguin who didn't do much here or hasn't done much most anywhere, McCarron, Novak, Sherwood, Sissons, Smith, Tomasino, and Yakov Trenin. So not a lot there. And on the blue line, Tyson Barrie's the only real threat if you had to look at it and try to find someone who might be able to put in a goal on you. So it was going to have to be Saros and a whole lot of defending and maybe a little bit of luck for Nashville. They didn't get it. And the Penguins, for once, took care of business and even played smartly down the stretch. That was one of the smarter sequences I've seen from this team this year when there was the delayed penalty, against Nashville with about, 3.5 minutes to go. And the Penguins just doubled back into their own zone and dared the Predators to come at them and try to take the puck away. The danger of the empty net, of course, lingering in all of our minds because, we kind of expect disaster to happen to this Penguins team late in the third period. But really it was a smart decision by the Pens to circle back, and I think they killed off about 45 seconds. And at that stage of the game, that is no small number. So the Penguins playing situational hockey, even on that power play, keeping to the wall unless they had clear chances to throw a pass to a scoring area. And there really was no drama after that last penalty was taken by Nashville. As a result, Sidney Crosby ends up with no points for the third straight game, but, he had 9 shots and also missed the net 4 other times, so he had plenty of opportunities. Saros robbed him on at least one occasion I can think of in the second period, but the point being Crosby doesn't have to score for the Penguins to win. Malkin ends up with an assist, so his home point streak continues, but Malkin only played 18-19. The Penguins didn't exactly squeeze blood out of their stars for once in this game. Even Chris Letang, he played 27 minutes again, so maybe the exception is him in this situation. But as far as Crosby and Malkin, they weren't leaning on them too much, and they still got 2 points and got a victory. And now they move on to a busy weekend, a challenge on Saturday against Boston before they'll welcome Philadelphia into PPG Paints. So another 2-game weekend at home for the Pens. And in this case, that first game, boy, it's going to be difficult, but I also think they might be catching Boston at the right time, like we saw with Nashville go into TD Garden and beat the Bruins earlier this week. My SC Education says, why didn't Sullivan pull DeSmith after the 3 goals in the first period? Oh, we're talking last game, are we? Can't get over that one. I don't blame you for that either. The Red Wings scoring 7 against the Penguins is what my SC Education is referring to here. And I live in Michigan now, so I saw a few more Red Wings shirts in the gym the day after. Wasn't too happy about that. Haven't seen those too much this season. The Wings were briefly frisky in the playoff race, but they dropped out even faster than the Sabres did. But the comment continues, feels like if Sullivan pulled DeSmith and gave Jarry a chance there, that the Penguins win. DeSmith gave up 2 real stinkers to David Perron in the third period. To just get that one to overtime would have been nice and would have given you some more breathing room against the Panthers, who have ended their losing streak in, dramatic fashion with a couple of wins on back-to-back nights. But I don't know the condition of Jarry. With him coming back from an injury, perhaps the consideration was, do we really want to throw him in cold or you say after the first period, maybe that was the chance to get him some warm-ups in the hallway or whatever, but it's not going to be the type of spot that he typically is in, obviously, when he's starting a game. So I also can understand if they wanted to be cautious with Jarry, and he has proven to be rather fragile physically in the second half of the season. No other way to say it. It just seems like he wakes up with a new injury after a given game, maybe once every couple of weeks. That's what it's felt like so far. Walt asks, I'm not an X's and O's guy, but is it a case of the Penguins not taking quality shots? They're clearly shooting, but it seems odd to have the high shots and the low goals. The Penguins in general this year have not been finishing well, and they're one of the worst finishing teams in the league. There could be something to the fact that the shots aren't of the highest quality. Just looking at tonight, what I've got pulled up on naturalstattrick.com, the Penguins end up with, we'll go all situations here, 84 shot attempts, 67 got through, 44 were on net, and wow, they're put down for 23 scoring chances on Natural Stat Trick for against just 6 for Nashville. So expected goals for the Penguins had 5.5 tonight. I think tonight was more the case of a goaltender shutting them down because they had 2 or 3 that I thought were tap-ins, and somehow Saros gets over. Just a complete goaltender, right? He stops the shots he sees. He stops the shots he doesn't. He fights through traffic. He handles the puck well. He was even playing like a third defenseman a couple of times. He blocked a centering pass from Rust late in the third period that stands out to me. So the Penguins out-expected goals, if that's a verb, the Predators tonight 5.4 to 1.4. So should have won by 4. They did win by 2 without the empty netter. So I guess we'll have to take that one and go forward. There's been so many chances this season to nitpick the Penguins' offensive performance, but I don't think that's the case here. And look, I'm happy with the volume. I think hockey is predominantly a volume game, and you're not going to face a Saros every night. Even against the Bruins coming up here on Saturday, you might get Ullmark, you might not, but I don't think Ullmark is a world beater. He's just playing behind a world-beating team in this case. So if you can generate 40 shots on target, I like your chances, and especially 84 shot attempts altogether. That was, I think, a strong performance tonight, all told, and it's against a Preds team that is used to defending, but I think it's more of a credit to their goaltender than to their team defense. As for where they are right now, still somehow alive in the playoff race despite selling off players at the deadline, including one Mikael Granlund to the Penguins, which I think we all wish they didn't do, but of course they did. So Penguins 2, Nashville nothing in this game. The Pens pick up the rare shutout, and now if we can look at those standings updated by the minute. 84 points for the Penguins. They're still 3 behind the Islanders. They still have 1 game in hand on the Islanders. Feels like they've had games in hand on New York the whole season, just the way the schedule's played out. So it's still possible to catch the Isles, which for me, that's got to be tops on your wish list for the Pens. Beyond even making the playoffs, I don't want to see them play Boston in the first round. I'd at least give them a chance against Carolina. But the Bruins, even if they have downshifted significantly here in the final waning days of the regular season, in which they already have 58 wins and 121 points, they are nearly 40 points ahead of the Penguins. 37 points, to be exact, ahead of the Penguins in the standings. And, well, they're 20 points, 18 points ahead of the nearest team in the East. So that's Carolina, by the way. I would love to see the Pens take on Carolina. They've been close games this year, and the Hurricanes aren't great finishers. Going up against a Penguins team which doesn't have outstanding goaltending, at least, well, it hasn't. Maybe Jarry can catch fire here and turn that thing around. Wouldn't that be ironic if the Penguins' goaltending could steal a series for them in a series in which they are outshot drastically, which I think would happen regardless of whether they play Boston or Carolina, but the Bruins have more top-notch finishers, notably David Pastrnak, compared to Carolina. And that's just been the Hurricanes' MO. They are a volume team. They're a simple team to play against, and you might get some looks against them, but you're going to have to at least have stable goaltending to have a look against Carolina. And as we've seen, stable is a long way up from where both Jarry and DeSmith have been in recent days. For Jarry, ever since the turn of the calendar page over to 2023. Let's see any other notables or notes from this game. Ryan Poehling had 2 semi-breakaways, actually 1 full breakaway, and couldn't bury. The ice was horrible tonight. I don't think that's speaking poorly on Ryan Poehling's skills, as one tweeter noted to me. Maybe he's just not that good of a player. Well, you just saw the goalie scored against Darcy Kemper in the Caps the other night. That's as handsy of a play as you can find. So I don't think it was that. I just think Blake Shelton and crew ruined the ice for the Penguins this evening, ironically, considering who they're playing tonight, the team from the country music capital. So that made the game more of a slog, too. And maybe that's why the Penguins, you could argue, simplified things a little bit as well, not just because of the situation, but because they couldn't get the puck to calm down. And so that took away from some of the offensive chances. Some of those golden scoring chances weren't quite as golden as they would be on a perfect ice sheet. Nashville showing its inexperience, I would say, taking some late penalties out of frustration, totally unnecessary penalties that killed their chances. And also I will note that, well, we saw Ryan McDonough, not a young player by any means, but assumed Jake Gensel was going to be at the top of the crease as opposed to on the post for that second and all-important insurance goal. So even veterans make mistakes, as we know, and as we've seen with the Pens this year, the oldest team in the NHL trying to buck trends in this league and really every other league in major professional sports and try to make a significant run in the postseason. They got to get to the postseason first. And I've had the feel this team is just trying to do enough to get to the end and save something in the tank. And we saw last year it actually worked against the Rangers. They looked horrible in the final weeks of the regular season last year, but the difference was they had more cushion, and up until Jarry got hurt, they had more goaltending as well. And even DeSmith was playing pretty well going into the postseason last year, or at least better than he has this year. So they're hanging on a knife's edge right now, and it obviously wasn't a must-win because we still have, 7 games to go in the regular season. But all these games are feeling like must-wins at this point, considering that the Panthers have gotten back on their feet and the Islanders aren't slowing down. They pick up a shootout win. It wasn't very impressive against Washington last night, but they keep collecting points, whether it's 1 or 2. And even a game that they played terribly against the Blue Jackets over the weekend, the Islanders got a point out of it, losing in overtime. So it's not the most scintillating playoff race, but it's also not being handed to the Penguins either. It's not a case of where you're playing against just one other team, because, like I mentioned, I think it's critical for the Pens to fight for that first wild card spot as well. So as far as I'm concerned, they're not in a spot where they want to finish the regular season, and I think a lot of you would probably agree with me there. This is Matt Gajtka on Pittsburgh Sports Live, if I can remember the platform. Sorry, I haven't done too many of these shows this year, but always enjoyable to chat with you. The Penguins in their alternate jerseys, I don't mind seeing those a little bit more. In fact, I kind of hope they keep those around even as the NHL transitions away from Adidas. And we've had so many different uniform looks this season. The Pens have worn, 5 different jerseys this year? But let's keep the diagonal Pittsburgh around long term. I would not be opposed to that move there. And I think that's probably the last time we're going to see them in this regular year. Just put the triangle behind the Penguin there up on the shoulders. He looks rather naked there. Nashville, just looking at the opponent here, surprised they're in the playoff race, but it really does tell you what goaltending can do for you. And I've seen some of my friends, both professional journalists and also just Twitter commentators, talk over the last couple of days about should the Penguins go for a Juuse Saros type via trade this offseason. First of all, I'm not sure they have the trade capital. Maybe they do. Maybe they can pawn off a contract on somebody, but you're not going to get a Saros type. This guy is a top 3 goaltender. I think he's right up there with the 2 Russians in New York, Sorokin and Shesterkin. But if the Penguins just had league average goaltending, they would have a multi-point lead on New York, the Islanders, that is, and would be challenging New York for the 3rd spot in the Metro, at least right now. So it might not take that much of an adjustment to get the Penguins back into a pretty comfortable playoff spot if you're talking about going into next year. And I think it's worth talking about it right now because this team, as currently constructed, does not look like a team that can go deep. in the playoffs. But if we're looking at this year and projecting ahead and saying, well, if Crosby and Malkin and Letang all look somewhere close to this next year, then if you get that goaltending upgrade, things look a lot more rosy than they have recently. This team has actually outchanced and outshot most of its opponents over the last 2 months, I would say, since that terrible game against Edmonton right at the end of January. Well, here we are at the end of March, and they're looking strong. They are absolutely tilting the ice on most nights, and that game against Detroit was an aberration in that regard. They didn't probably deserve to win that one, but even there, some of the goals that were against them were either bad goaltending or bad luck. I think a combination of both on a few of them, and even there they could have found a way if they had a little bit better play between the pipes. So you look at a team like Nashville, especially with players out, I will admit that, but even with players in, all the players that they have under contract in the lineup, Juuse, who you have to obviously account for, Forsberg, among them, even with those guys active, Saros is still probably their best player, or at least right up there with Roman Josi, who is getting toward the back end of his career. So yeah, I wouldn't be shy about saying Saros is their star. You don't have to have a star goalie, but I think it would be worth it to stretch a little bit, maybe give up a little bit more than you want this offseason to find someone who can either play with Jarry or replace Jarry as your number one goaltender, because goaltending papers over a lot of bills and can give you some more chances to get the finishing touch at the other end and try to win a few more games next year, because this year has been, like I've said in the past, I feel like we've been sweating blood down the stretch in some of these games, and no, the Penguins have not played flawlessly. They've coughed up big leads to the Islanders in the third period just over the past month, 2 separate occasions there. They nearly blew a 3-0 lead against Washington, I think primarily due to goaltending. The team didn't capitulate. It was more about DeSmith not being able to hold the fort there. And they were in a couple of tie games here recently against the Sens. That was with Jarry in net. And against the Red Wings, where they could have at least gotten a point out of each of those. I don't think that was too much to ask against 2 teams that are going to miss the playoffs. And they can't get a stop late. So just this month, you see a pretty darn good example of where goaltending can fill in some gaps. And I know, we all know goaltending is important, but I think it helps to see these examples concretely right in front of our eyes to be able to point to some spots where you could feasibly see a rather large jump in the standings, maybe even up to 8-10 points if you have a league average goaltender, which even if you look at the numbers right now, like Juuse Saros at a .915, that's about as good as it gets in the NHL. Goaltending is dropping down toward the 900 mark in terms of average. The shooters' offenses have the advantage over the past several seasons. That trend continues to go up and up. I think NHL teams are averaging about 3.2 goals per game this year. So we're seeing more than 6 goals in a game for the 3rd consecutive season, all told. It was a long time prior to this recent stretch since we saw that way back right after the full season lockout. So offenses are ruling. So you might have to lower your standards a little bit. I know I've had to, just watching games around the league and figuring out what is good goaltending and what's not. But you don't need a .915 save percentage. You need just a .905, heck, a .900, and you'd be in better shape. So that's the shame of it, right? And ironically, the general manager is a former goaltender, one of the most notable goaltenders, at least in the modern portion of the NHL's long history. Pens fan Drew says, love the diagonal Pittsburgh jerseys. Like I said, they're not perfect. I think that logo on the shoulder, well, you've embraced the corporate Penguin, the Emperor Penguin this year, the Howard Baldwin era logo. Why not put that back on the sleeves like it was in 1992-93 when those jerseys were introduced as the road jersey and eventually became, for a little while, they were the alternate jersey as well. But there's some options there if you want to roll those back over. And I kind of like those Pittsburgh Pirates uniforms too. Not the baseball Pirates, mind you. They do beat the Reds today, but the Winter Classic jerseys, I suppose you could call them. I think those have some promise as well. So I actually like all 5 of the uniforms the Pens have worn this year, even though obviously part of that is a play toward getting folks to snap up merchandise. Well, it's working on me. I'm a sucker for that sort of thing. I know that much. Any other comments as we tick down toward Well, actually past the top of the hour here, 10 o'clock, after the Penguins do dispatch the Predators. Thank goodness they do defeat a team they should beat, even though the Preds are just as desperate as they are at the moment, even more so because they're hanging on by a thread in the Western Conference playoff race, whereas the Penguins are still, at least coming into tonight, looking like a team that more often than not, if you ran a 10,000 simulation sequence, they'd make the playoffs 5,000 times or a little bit more than that, I would think. 50% or more, I would say. But still, these games are urgent as we've seen at this portion of the season since 2014-15, the Mike Johnston full season when they had to win. I think that was 2-0 as well at Buffalo the last day of the regular season to get into the playoffs, only to get bamboozled by the Rangers in the first round. That was a really good Rangers team. That was not a very good Penguins team. I think this year's team is better than that year's team, but it may come down to the final game, as it turns out. And I just want to take a glance down the rest of the schedule here, as I don't believe I'll be doing a show on Saturday, but Sunday with the Flyers coming in, that gives us another line of demarcation here. If the Pens get by that, say they get 3 points on the weekend, in pretty good shape, as they'll then travel to New Jersey, which has already clinched the playoffs next week. Then they have Minnesota at home, tough draw on Thursday, and then another trip to Detroit. So next week, New Jersey, Minnesota, and Detroit, and the final week is Chicago and Columbus, two real cellar dwellers, teams that are selling out for Connor Bedard, or at least the most bingo balls in the chamber in the Bedard lottery next month. So the last 3 games should be games they can take care of. In the meantime, though, these aren't going to be easy, even Philadelphia, right? Because you never expect an easy game against the Flyers, even in their weakened state as of right now. Let's go Pens. 8771 says, Brian Dumoulin is elite. Let's not get too carried away, but as Steve Mears noted on the broadcast tonight on AT&T Sportsnet, which I guess is still viable until the end of March. I don't know what's going to happen after that. I hope it's still on ESPN Plus for people like me out of market. But anyway, Dumoulin's got, 6 assists in his last 14 games, which is for him, like a Paul Coffey-like stretch of playmaking from the blue line. Like I said, setting up Carter, that was a gorgeous pass last week in Denver, and tonight just as good, even better, because he had to make a move to get around somebody before he put it on Zucker's tape for the eventual game winner. One last comment here. Walt Flanagan, again, says Hextall was crazier than a rainbow trout in a car wash as a player. What a reference, or what a analogy. And now he's comatose as a GM, most perplexing human. It really is odd, isn't it? You wouldn't expect someone like him, who lashed out repeatedly on the ice, who was a tinderbox in net, and a guy that you didn't want to mess with, honestly, because he would be easily agitated and could take a swing at you with that big goal stick. And those were wood back then, too. That really hurt. As a general manager, as an assistant general manager in Los Angeles, apparently did some pretty good work, but in Philadelphia, just kept that franchise in neutral. And here, same deal. And in Pittsburgh, neutral is dropping back because the core is getting older, and he's adding older players. So you're not exactly fighting against the march of time, right? Even that would have been treading water just to add some younger legs to this squad. He has turned away from that. So it's been a whole bunch of either nothing or detrimental efforts over the past year. I did like the Ricard Raquel acquisition, and at the moment that Jeff Carter was picked up, he was pretty good for them. But then he follows that up, of course, Hextall does, with the extension with the no movement clause for Carter, his old buddy from Los Angeles. So Hextall, the opposite of Jim Rutherford in at least one way, in action versus inaction in some ways, but Hextall has also made some moves that have hurt the Penguins in a big way, too. So I don't know if comatose is the right word, but I would say misguided. I don't see him as ever taking a big swing, and that's where I'm torn on this season, because I want the Penguins to make the playoffs. I want them to do well. I want this core to get what they deserve, which is another playoff berth, but I also don't want the front office or Hextall himself to feel like it was a success, because it certainly wasn't this year. This team should be further up the standings than it is right now, with some better player personnel moves, even just average player personnel moves, not detrimental moves. And, yeah, we'll cap it with this. Flanagan, again, Robbie Brown doing the windmill, and Hextall chasing him will live forever. Sure will. I guess fitting to think about that as the time that Rob Brown got the best of Ron Hextall, and so did the Penguins, at least in that game. But remember, the Flyers ended up winning that series with Ken Reggett coming in relief for the Flyers. It was at 1988 or 89. I believe it was 89. Yeah, it was 2 years before the Penguins' first Stanley Cup. But, yeah, one of the more entertaining series in Penguins history. No coincidence it was against the Flyers. And if you are sticking pins in your Ron Hextall voodoo doll, then you can always go back and find that replay of the Penguins just driving Ron Hextall batty back then. Tonight, it was about goaltending, but it was about Tristan Jarry out-battling and out-dueling Juuse Saros. Maybe Jarry finally turning a corner. Can we hope that we don't get some injury report tomorrow that said he woke up with a sore whatever? We never find out, of course, and he'll be out for another couple of weeks. Hope that's not the case. But even if it was good to see Jarry back on his game and, well, quite literally flawless in stopping 28 shots in his second shutout of the season. The Penguins stay ahead of the Panthers, at least for one more night or a couple of more nights before they face the President's Trophy winning Boston Bruins. We can already say that with still a couple of weeks to go in the regular season. And that'll be on Saturday, another ABC game. The Penguins have been, I would say, overexposed on national TV, but hey, whatever. We'll take it. 3 o'clock start from PPG Paints Arena. And by then, I don't know if the Panthers play again before then, but they're still, the Penguins are just 1 point up for that final playoff spot. So they're all important now. I guess buckle up and gird your loins for more of what we've seen. The playoff race is tight, and a game like tonight, tight as can be until the very end. This is Matt Gajtka. Thank you for watching. I humbly ask you to like and subscribe and sign up for the notifications here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'll talk to you next time.